Hello there, my name's Dimitri Adoniu, and this is Lovesick Darlings, the benefit of making a demo expansive. One of the talks as part of this is one of the talks as part of Melbourne International Games Week's Steam Festival live programming. Hope you've been enjoying the shows so far. There's been some great talks. Hopefully you enjoy mine too. This won't take more than 20 or so minutes, and is going to be relatively off the cuff as I talk about my game as gameplay goes off in the background, which I'll get started now. So, that'll play in the background. There we go, and we're in business. Um, so let's get. I'll quickly first. I'm skipping ahead quickly. I'll go over my table of contents. So first off, I'll talk about my game and its demo. Give you a brief history and an overview of the game. Um, Focusing specifically on this demo and what I learned from it, the benefits of my demo strategy, the unique approach I had, and how this non-traditional approach got me some relative success for a solo dev who's just been working on this game in his free time. It's gotten me interviews, streams, job opportunities, 20,000 downloads, uh, events like, Melbourne International Games Week too as well. So, I suppose we should just get right into it. So, my name, as I mentioned earlier, is Dimitri Donu. I'm a solo dev living in Melbourne, Australia, as of course Melbourne International Games Week would imply. I studied writing at university and got a master's in screenwriting. So I've got a keen interest in writing across all forms of media, especially screen media. So that's why I ended up writing a visual novel in my spare time and have kind of turned it into a major creative project after a Kickstarter, which successfully funded the assets you're looking at and will be looking at over the course of this presentation. So, what is this game? This is Lovesick Darlings. It is a coming of age adolescent romance visual novel. So, visual novels are not the sometimes not a traditional example of what a video game can be, but I think they're just as important as any other game because they are about making decisions and using both visual and audio and player input to have an experience. So yeah, to quickly just justify visual novels real quick, I think that's important to keep in mind. So, what is the story? This follow the story of... So that's the main thing about visual novels. It's a story. So that's the important thing to talk about, isn't it? So this story follows teenage protagonist Sid as he navigates the complex web of relationships in his life as they develop and change based on his actions as the school year comes to an end and his close-knit friend group starts changing in ways he may or may not be ready for, and he has to confront both the feelings in himself and in others, and hopefully not get his own heart broken and not break anyone else's on the way either. So that's the game. As you can imagine, it's all about romance, nostalgia, and coming of age, growing up. It's all very romantic in a sense, isn't it? So, if I had to summarize what Lovesick Darlings is and what the game's demo needs to communicate as soon as possible to the player, it's these three kind of core pillars, I'm going to call them. This game is about hard choices, dynamic relationships, and romance. These three things are going to be intermingled, of course. They're all related to each other, or they're part of the network that is the core of this game. And that's why these three things are what this demo wants to communicate as soon as possible. So let's kind of go through that as the demo plays in the background. So, as I mentioned earlier, and as the title of the talk will imply, this demo is kind of non-traditional. It's not what you'd expect to find on the Steam Marketplace, I suppose, the Steam Store, sorry. In the sense that it's roughly 8 hours long to complete one run of just the demo alone. And to put that in context, that's about a third of the game's full runtime. So just by hitting download on the Lovesick Darling Steam store, please wishlist, by the way, just by hitting download demo on that page, you have access to the first third of Lovesick Darlings for free. Unrestricted, no time limits, no restrictions on the in-game choices or gameplay or assets missing. You have free reign on the first third of the game. Which is something I don't see many other game demos doing. I think visual novels are better at doing this, but I think games of all genres could benefit from this. And hey, that might sound crazy. I know some people out there would be like, you're giving away a third of your game for free? Like, that's madness. Why would you do that? But I actually think it put my game in a unique position that kind of gave it the success it has today. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and be like, yeah, this is Elden Ring. This is this is Stardew Valley. This is Undertale. Like, no, I'm not in those levels of success, obviously. I'm not going to kid myself or you. But I do think this kind of confidence to be able to say, hey, here is the first 8 hours of my game, completely free. It's in your hands now. You have, no matter what, you have access to so much of the game that no matter what, you will know whether you like it or not. Whether you stop playing 10 minutes, 30 minutes, 5 hours in, or all the way finish it, you will know 100% for sure, without a doubt, whether you like this game or not, whether you like the story and the characters, and whether that is something you want to then purchase for the rest, to experience the rest of the game. So let's talk about this demo's features and those three pillars I mentioned earlier. Because Lovesick Darlings isn't an action game, I have to find other ways to show off game features. So it's one of those, as we're seeing right now, is here, choices. And that's one of the pillars I mentioned earlier, the first one. So compared to an action game, like, Devil May Cry, for example, or any other kind of character action game, the inherent fun of that game is immediately apparent. You tell the player, X is weak attack, Y is strong attack, etc., etc. Press this to shoot a projectile, press this to jump, press this to dodge. Your player will be able to input that and get a result. Like, a demon will show up, you press slash, boom, he brings his sword out, and he slashes it. Presses it multiple times, he does a combo. You press X to fire a weapon, boom, he shoots the gun and shoots the demon. And that's an amazing benefit of these traditional input reaction games, I suppose I might call them. Just coining that term on the spot right now. But for a visual novel or any narrative-based game, I think this can extend out to strategy and point-and-click adventure games. Any game where you're not pressing a button and making a character do something, you're rather pressing a button to advance a story or advance a menu or advance a relationship, or, like right now, picking a thing to say. It's kind of tricky to get people to understand the appeal of that in a short amount of time. So, what I try to do here in this demo is kind of immediately show that these actions, these decisions you're making, have consequences. So when you say to Maisie, I like you just the way you are, she immediately tells you how it feels, right? This sounds basic and like anyone could think this, but this is the visual novel equivalent of press press Y to slash a demon. You know, when you say something, you want a character to react to it. A surprising amount of choice-based games have pre-canned answers that are the same no matter what you input. So I think immediately showing that my character has some kind of complexity and complicated thought process is a good way to kind of hint to the player that this game has characters who are complex and have feelings that are a bit more dynamic. So let's fast forward a little bit for a good example of that. So we'll fast forward a little bit here. Sorry, but we come to a big decision right here in the game. So this is my way. In the demo, this is like in a game where you would end the first level of a demo with a mini boss to show up and, you know, test your skill. This is the equivalent in a visual novel demo. A big decision where you're like, oh, this is going to define my relationship with this character. So right now, having just been thrown in, meeting this girl for the first time, being put in Sid, the main character's shoes for the first time, I'm asking you, the player, do you kiss her or hug her? And the context of this conversation, I know I fast forwarded a bit. If you're reading along, basically, she's had a really bad experience, and you're comforting her. And now you're given this choice. It's, do you try and be sensitive and give her some space by just, you know, hugging her to comfort her? Or maybe the romantic tension, there's something there and you can feel it, and maybe this is actually the way to make her happy, to kiss her instead. I don't know. Who knows? It's up to the player to decide. It's your first real challenge past learning the controls, as it were. And I wanted to front load this right at the front of this demo because I kind of want to give the player the expectation and understanding of what kind of decisions you are making in this game. And I think that's really important to make sure these first big decisions are indicative of what's to come, for lack of a better word. So, you know, what am I trying to say? So in this game, you're going to be asked to judge and reciprocate or not reciprocate stuff about relationships and romance and day-to-day life and drama. And I think that's what this first conversation is quite good at. It sucks you in and gets you invested and kind of shows that this visual novel is kind of a bit atypical compared to others, because she talks about how she had a previous relationship that's just fallen apart now. And as if you've played any amount of visual novels, you know right away that it's incredibly rare for any heroine in a visual novel to have had a previous, you know, ex-boyfriend or girlfriend or anything, you know? So by front-loading this kind of information, I communicate the tone of the game as well. It's kind of a classic thing in stories. You know, you set the stakes, you set the expectations, I suppose, of the players, so they're not blindsided when they reach them. Like, if I had just started with Sid waking up in bed and going to school, you kind of wouldn't know, what is this about? Is this just about Sid going to school and talking to his friends and then maybe flirting with them sometimes? But instead, I chose to have this scene at the beginning that's very dramatic and tense to be like, hey, this is what you're going to be doing for the rest of the game. This is what you're heading towards. And it's a classic trick in games to open with a premonition scene. Like Bayonetta does the same thing. Even though in that game it starts with this crazy dramatic fight on a falling clock tower. It then goes back in time to see how did we get there. And my game does the exact same thing. It's a classic thing in both video games and stories and movies in general. It's a very handy tool in a writer's toolkit to be able to be like, this is where we're going, let's find out how we get there. So now that's the stage we're at now in the demo. We're in the how do we get to that scene at the beginning? And that's kind of what this demo is leading towards. And it's basically giving you the expectations of all three pillars, basically. About hard choices, dynamic relationships, and romance. So romance kind of comes inherent with the genre of visual novels and dating sims in general. But that first scene makes it pretty clear. This heroine is torn up about her relationship, and then your relationship with her is being tested, and you're kind of trying to work out, do I want to take this romantically or not, and that then leads into the second pillar, dynamic relationships. Are your relationships always going to be romantic? You get the choice. Do you just want to be friends? Or do you not like this person? Or what kind of... what do you say to make them feel better when they're sad? Or what do you say when they need a reality check, This is all stuff that kind of comes up in this first, couple of decisions here, right? So let's just keep going. Yeah, I'm only halfway through the thing, so let's keep going. I need to speed this up a little. So, right, and before I leave that behind, and then it goes to the first pillar I mentioned as well, hard choices. The hard choice, of course, is do you kiss or hug your friend when they're sad and there's a little bit of romantic tension? Who knows? Everyone's been in some version of that situation, and asking, the player to apply themselves and what their choice would be to this game to get a result is kind of the core gameplay loop of Lovesick Darlings and any branching visual novel. So yeah, that's kind of what we're introduced here. Now that we're in the ordinary world, or we're kind of in the typical setting of just hanging out at school and talking to friends, we can now get into the traditional stuff that every demo and storyline and game starts with. We introduce the player to the core concepts of the game. So on the top left here, you'll see a date and time. This already implies that, okay, we're following a day and time system, a la Persona, or The World Ends With You, or Boku no Natsu Yasumi, right? These games where you follow a calendar and every day you do something. So if we fast forward a little bit, we'll fast forward a little bit as we get to know some characters. We're introduced to all the characters, blah, 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 and things happen. So here's another example of a hard decision. We are giving advice to this girl now, and we've got the context of this girl, Maisie, one of the lead heroines, I should say. She's not just some girl. Now we give her advice of whether to be careful or supportive of this new relationship she's in. There's lots of complexity to be found there in this relationship. Do you be a good friend, or do you follow your instinct, especially now that I've planted the idea in the player's mind that this relationship may not be so good? It's a good question, isn't it? But anyway, as we can see now, we've kind of got up to the part I wanted to show off. As we go on, the date and time changes up here. So just by a bit of UI that you front load right at the beginning, you show how I'm implementing the gameplay loop, basically. And that's what the demo communicates in kind of a second. And that's what you want to be doing the whole time with your demo. You want information to be communicated very quickly, even if your game is not fast-paced. Like, my game is not fast-paced at all, if you can tell by the 8-hour demo. Many games aren't even 8 hours, so yeah, obviously I know that's not going to be applicable to everyone, but I mean, that is the core takeaway I want to get back to after all this rambling, is that I think that generous and lengthy demos are beneficial to players and developers alike. So now that I've talked through some of the philosophy of what I've done literally in the demo, let's talk a bit outside baseball. Inside baseball, I guess, really is the right phrase. And let's talk about what I learned from Lovesick Darlings and creating this demo and the benefits of these kinds of lengthy free demos. So, number one, I think we, as developers, we should be generous with our demos because it costs nothing. You are developing this game one way or the other. You are making a product. You are putting in the work to create it. So offering more of it for free doesn't cost you money, in my opinion. At least in my opinion. Because if you offer the first 2 hours of a 10-hour game and give players a decent idea of what it's like, but then, for example, let's say your game during like 2 hours and 45 minutes in, that's when it gets really good. Like the first act turn has happened and we are in... maybe not the first act turn, like the first real plot twist in the game happens, but it's not available in the demo and people have no idea what that's like. I think you're losing opportunities by not offering that to players because it doesn't cost you anything to give away the product you've already made a little bit more, if that makes sense. Obviously you still want to make money, obviously you still need to find some kind of profit, right? But I think that most games I play always cut you off at about an hour, hour and a half. Usually. 99% of them. But I think letting players get immersed can pay dividends. So, in many ways. So, for example, like what I was saying earlier, someone will know, no matter what, if a game is for them by 8+ hours like this demo is. Like, if you go through 8 hours of Lovesick Darlings, chances are you know whether you are buying it or not. There is not a doubt in your mind. But if I made this demo 1 hour long instead, an hour might not be enough to convince a player. And let's say for this made up 10 hour, let's say it's a 10-hour action game that I'm just making up now. Let's say they make the first hour free. That means you've given yourself 1 hour to impress a player. Meanwhile, if you give 3 hours of that 10-hour game for free, which is about a third of the game, much like the ratio I've got, that means you have tripled your opportunity to impress and immerse your player. And, you know, as devious as this might sound, the more someone plays, the more likely they are to continue, right? The further they get in a demo, the further progress they make in your game, the more likely they are to get invested. Whether it's your story, your characters, your gameplay, you're giving them more opportunities to fall in love with your game by having a longer demo. And I think that's a big part of why Lovesick Darlings actually found success. Because the first hour of the game will give you an indication of what this game is like, what the characters care about, you know, what kind of story this is, etc., etc. But you might not fall in love with the game yet. You might not be compelled yet. But for this kind of long-running game, and it's especially true for visual novels, but I do think it's applicable to games in general, I do think you are robbing yourself by not giving your players more time to fall in love with your product, by not making the demos longer and more generous. I think a long demo also projects a lot of confidence and inspiration, for lack of a better word. That is kind of something that can't be bought. I think a player can be quite impressed if a demo is longer than they expected. Like, that feeling of, like when that demo over, that's all players are going to think. They're going to be like, oh man, it's over. Which can be an okay feeling, but I think an even better feeling than, like I wish I could play more is, oh wow, is after 8 hours, the player being like, "Oh wow, I forgot it was a demo," like, or just like, "Oh damn, I played so much more than I thought I could." Like that kind of surprise, that pleasant surprise. It's like when you walk into the supermarket, grab something off the shelf, and then when you get to the checkout, it's cheaper than you thought. That is the exact feeling a super long demo gives to players, I think. And it's why this game has gotten, I think, a lot of positive reviews, even just from its demo ratings. Like, just from its demo, sorry. The player feedback has been extremely positive. People are invested in the story. They want to know more. And I think it's because they had the time to fall in love with the story and the characters. And for your game, it may not even be story and characters. It might be a cool gameplay loop. It may be a physics engine. It might be puzzles. It might be anything. Whatever your game is, it actually doesn't matter. I think it's helpful for visual novels and writing, but I think it's applicable to pretty much any kind of video game. I'm running out of time here, so I better hurry this up to get to my final points. My final point, basically, overall, I think people need to have longer demos. The number one takeaway I want to give anyone listening, basically, is be generous with your demos. There's no reason not to. It costs you nothing. The benefits accumulate instantly, in my opinion. I treat my demo like a portfolio because it has given me many opportunities, like this opportunity now to talk to you. It's gotten me jobs, it's gotten me interviews, it's gotten me podcasts, it's gotten me all kinds of things because so much of my writing and skill is being confidently showcased to the world and not behind a paywall. Like, you know, I think being able to just be like, hey, come check out my stuff is something kind of that doesn't have a price on it, if that makes sense. It's so free and good to be able to do. Like, again, obviously this assumes your game is great. But I believe your games are great. I'm not saying they aren't. But even if your game isn't great, I still think it's worth doing because then you'll know. Then people will give it a go and they'll tell you what they didn't like. And at least they'll have had a chance to play so much that their thoughts will be so informed and so helpful. So yeah, don't be afraid of giving away your game. Don't be like, oh, what if I spoil it? What if I give away too much? What if this? What if it's gonna ruin the game? It won't. It will literally never ruin the game. It's just more opportunities for people to love your product, love your game, and ask for more. And that's why I think we should all just be more generous with demos. Just make them longer. Make them free, make them longer, make them widely available and advertised. And the rest will follow. People always want... Yeah. The more chances... A longer demo is a longer chance to prove why your game or product is awesome. So don't be afraid to do it. It costs you nothing. I don't think anyone in the world has played an 8-hour demo, like for example for me, gotten to the end and thought I was going to buy this if it was a 3-hour demo, but because it was 8 hours, I won't. No way. No one in a million years has. Do you know what has happened though? And I've heard about this from fans, is they fell in love with the story and game and characters because of how much time I gave them to fall in love. So, yeah, I think that's my words of advice. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoy the rest of the show, listen to all the other speakers, and have a good day. Thank you.